We talk so much about finding ourselves, about healing, evolving, becoming, but rarely do we talk about the energetic cost of those things. True self connection requires presence, reflection, and stillness. And yet, many women are too exhausted to even begin. Like, we're tired, not just physically, but also spiritually. Tired from overextending, from being everything to everyone, from the constant performing, accommodating, trad wifing, girl bossing, hustling. In that state of depletion, self knowledge becomes a luxury we can't afford. How do we expect to know ourselves, accept ourselves, and embody ourselves when we have no energy left to do so? And rest as restoration, and women resting and finally getting to know themselves, accepting themselves, and embodying themselves. That is the feminine restoration. And it's not supposed to be this like revolutionary thing because it's so simple, but yet it is. And one of the reasons why is the gender sleep gap. Hello, hello, and welcome to Powerhouse of the Cell, a space where longevity, belief, and femininity intersect to help us lead longer, healthier, and more intentional lives.
I know, it's a new intro. I'm still getting used to it.
Because it's not just about looking younger, it's creating a life worth extending. It's not just about more years, it's about better ones. Because aging well isn't just about what you do, it's about remembering who you are and what you value. You are the powerhouse, and the power has always been within you. Now, we have a lot to cover, but before we get into it, I need you to hit the like, subscribe, and the notification bell so you never miss a Powerhouse episode. With that being said, let's get into it. Hello again, and thank you for joining me on the very first episode of Powerhouse of the Cell. I am so excited to do this series because I have been wanting to talk about these topics for a long time now, and I just didn't think that they fit the spoiled girly vibe. So I'm like, I've been really having a hard time coming up with new episodes that fit the spoiled girly vibe. Like, there was a block, and I'm like, you know what? I need to create what wants to be created. So I'm like, she's really wanting to be created, so we're gonna create her. So not only are we starting a new series on YouTube called Powerhouse of the Cell, I also started a Substack called Powerhouse of the Cell. So if you want to get the full transcript, show notes, and sources for today's episode, go to the Substack. It's linked below, and I will see you there. And for the OG Spoiled Girlies, do not worry. We are still doing our regular programming, Spoiled Girly Support Group. I feel like I have gotten my groove back, and I'm just so excited to share everything. I am in my creating era right now. Like, I feel like I've always been, but like the creativity is just different right now. And I'm loving it. So, yeah, we are doing everything the exact same way. We're adding on this new series because I am in my science writing era. So, thank you for joining me in my science writing era. And as many of the OG spoiled girlies know, I was in academia. Let's talk about it. This was me on the school website back then. I didn't have a manager, so they didn't pay me. But yeah, they got to use my image and likeness for free for years on the school website. So the least I can do is use it for my own stuff too. And I really enjoyed the work, and it was really fun. You get to be really creative, you get to experiment and just really use your brain to solve a lot of problems and find connections in whatever is happening, whatever you are observing. And that experience from doing research as an undergrad, like I started anti aging research as a sophomore in undergrad and continued that as a PhD student. And I learned a lot. Like, I learned so much. And one of the things that I was experiencing at the time, though, is that even though I was learning how to stay healthier longer, how to slow down aging, how to help people lead better lives, the modalities that you can implement so that you can live a healthier life longer, because it's not really only about the years. Like, if you can extend your life from living up to 80 to up to 90 years old, if those extra 10 years you're bedridden, you're unhealthy, you don't even know who you are anymore, are those even quality years? So that was kind of the point of my research, was extending those healthy years, not necessarily just years period, because we have gotten so good actually at keeping people alive longer, but are we keeping them healthier longer? So imagine me as a scientist, doing my little bench work, researching how to extend people's lives and help people lead healthier lives, all while doing the exact opposite of these healthy habits that we already agree will help us lead longer, healthier lives. I was stressed, not sleeping well. I wasn't experiencing the warm, healthy, accepting community that I grew up with and that I have now after leaving academia, because it is all encompassing when you are in academia. Like, you're in a bubble. Like, really, you are. Because you wake up, you think about your work, you go to bed, you think about your work. Like, that is your whole life. And I really do admire people who work in academia. Like, I have been around the greatest minds. And it's crazy. Like, they are just astoundingly intelligent, and I have nothing but admiration for them, but at the same time, I knew it wasn't for me. Like, I knew that wasn't where I'm supposed to be. And so I left. And after some time, now that I have lived a life outside of academia, I feel like I have gotten real world experience. And I'm now able to make connections between my work in academia, my experiences in real life as a woman moving through the world, and my outside readings regarding spirituality, femininity, feminism, and the different waves of feminism. I feel like they're all coming together now. And that's why we're doing a series on Powerhouse of the Cell to kind of tie in all the revelations that have been revelationing for me. And I feel like to also combat that anti intellectualism kind of trend, it could be helpful to go back to my roots and embrace science writing and translating all the knowledge that these amazing people are discovering into more relatable and more timely revelations for us everyday people so we can live better, healthier, and longer lives together. Because I've been thinking about this. The future is female, the future is matriarchy, but like, I want to live to see it. And if I do live to see it, I want to live to perceive it, because it's like I said, it's one thing to live longer, but it's another thing to live longer, healthier, with your mind intact, with your body still moving. So I'm so excited for this series, and I hope you are too. Now, with all that being said, let's talk about sleep. This episode is sponsored by I Love Isla. I am really in my nude beige era right now this week. This subtle beige nude that is pretty sheer, so it matches your skin tone even though it kind of looks warmer. And I was skeptical about this color, not gonna lie. It looked a lot lighter in the box, but it's pretty sheer, so when you put it on your own nail beds, it kind of matches your skin tone, and I love that. So she's really versatile. Like, obviously, I'm pretty tan. And even though it looks lighter from the box, I was like, hopefully it looks good. It actually looks good because it's pretty sheer. So it actually blends in with a lot of skin tones, and I love that. And what I like about these press on nails is, as you can see, they look like I just got my nails done. And as a girly who's very sensitive sensory wise, these are the most comfortable press on nails I have ever tried. And I was really particular with sourcing the nails because I am a very sensory sensitive girly. And I made sure that the base of the press on nails taper towards your cuticle for that comfort fit, but thicker towards the tip, so it's pretty durable for everyday wear. And that's on detail. So if you want to experience I Love Isla, go to iloveilashop.com and use code SPRING10 to get 10% off your order. That's iloveilashop.com and use code SPRING10 to get 10% off your order. Now back to the topic. We live in a culture obsessed with productivity, and it makes sense because we live in a world where efficient productivity translates to resources. So the more productive you are, the logic is that you will have more resources. And so it sets up this dynamic where rest is seen as secondary and even an inconvenience to this constant need to produce for survival. And so rest and sleep have become a sort of indulgence, especially when it comes to women. And one book that captured how indulgent and rebellious rest is for women is Otessa Moshfegh's My Year of Rest and Relaxation. And I read this book in 2022 as per my Notion reading log, and I really enjoyed it even though I thought that it was kind of weird. And then I read Moshfegh's other book, Lapvona, and that was even weirder. So, yeah, if you are looking for weird girl books, Lapvona. Anyway, My Year of Rest and Relaxation is basically about this wealthy young woman, and her parents just passed. And so one would think that she's in grieving, right? And she's in her early 20s, she's conventionally attractive, and like I said, she's wealthy. And the whole book is basically just her sleeping and waking up for a little bit and interacting with people and maybe actually doing stuff while she was sleeping, like sleepwalking. There was a lot of that. And the book was groundbreaking, in my opinion, because it highlights female disengagement in a way that's really unsettling, but also unapologetic. Like, she doesn't apologize for sleeping through everything. It was also a radical rejection of femininity as performance. Like I said, she's very wealthy, she's pretty, and she should be quote unquote winning in life. But instead of capitalizing on these privileges that she had to maybe climb a corporate ladder or network in the art scene, or be an influencer. Oh, it's also set in New York City. So yeah, she could be a New York City influencer, a boring New York City influencer. But despite all the privileges that she has, she does none of that. Instead, she sedates herself. And her doing that is basically a big FU to the world that is expecting her to grieve her parents or participate in capitalism. But she's wealthy, like independently wealthy, so she's already winning in capitalism. So her detachment from the world is the statement in itself. And what's interesting about it too is that she doesn't think that there's anything wrong with what she's doing. Like, she doesn't ever say that, oh, maybe I should stop sedating myself, maybe I should participate in the world. Like, she does none of that. Like, she's so unapologetic. And I would be remiss not to mention the privilege aspect in this book about how she has this friend Riva. She's also pretty, she gets her way in the world, but she's not independently wealthy like the main character. And so Riva has to grieve her mother when her mother passes. Riva has to work in a workplace, and it ultimately, spoiler alert, ends with Riva experiencing something catastrophic because of her inability to detach from the world, because she doesn't have the same privilege that her friend, her rich friend, has to be able to detach from the world. So that's also a theme. But the reason why I wanted to bring up this book is it just captures how weird and out of place it is for women to detach, for women to rest and relax, especially for an extended period of time, especially unapologetically, especially on her terms. Because historically, that just hasn't been the vibe. And you may say, okay, that's actually not true. There's plenty of paintings and works of art where women are just vibing, they're laying down, they're resting. And one of the most popular like women at rest paintings that the TikTok algorithm serves me is Ophelia in the Water. And it's this painting, and a lot of the TikTok girlies have been memifying this painting, kind of saying like girl moss, girl rest, girl moss. But she's not at rest. She's resting in peace. Okay, if you're familiar with the Ophelia story, she's not resting. Okay, she's resting in peace because she is in despair. She's grieving and she just is giving up on life. And also, the manner in which Ophelia exits the world is very reminiscent of the water tread test in mice and how that is used as a gauge of depression. Basically, if you put mice in a body of water like a tub, the ones that give up and just sink down, they're the depressed mice, and then the ones who fight for their lives and get on a platform and save themselves, they're the non-depressed mice. And it kind of just reminds me of what happened to Ophelia. Like, she was sad and grieving and in despair, and she just gets in the water and just sinks down. Okay, right? The connections are connectioning. So, yeah. I wonder who came up with that tread test. Was it Ophelia inspired? I don't know. Okay, so anyway, from that time period, like 1800s ish, the Victorian times, pre Raphaelite times, there are paintings of women lying down or sleeping, but it's always off, like they're not happy about it. Like, they're not vibing. And that's because their rest and also their isolation, it wasn't self inflicted, it was mandated. In the portrayal of the cloistered Victorian woman, women were isolated from the outside world, a world that was socially and politically considered a masculine realm. While men actively participated in the public, women were unable to engage in the outside world because it would taint their feminine virtue. So, these paintings of women resting and the idea of women resting, it isn't really this empowering notion that we see today. And I keep thinking of examples of women resting in art. Peggy Hopper's paintings, she has a gallery in Hawaii. Literally every painting is a woman at rest, a brown woman at rest. And the vibe isn't that the woman is passive or weak or even erotic. Like, that's not the vibe. The woman is resting as she should. Soft life aesthetic, like before that even became a thing. And it's such a departure from the Victorian era and adjacent eras paintings of women resting, where resting women are seen as weak and frail and inferior. Like, no. And this gets us into the next point. We talk so much about finding ourselves, about healing, evolving, becoming, but rarely do we talk about the energetic cost of those things. True self connection requires presence, reflection, and stillness. And yet, many women are too exhausted to even begin. Like, we're tired, not just physically, but also spiritually. Tired from overextending, from being everything to everyone, from the constant performing, accommodating, tradwifing, girl bossing, hustling. In that state of depletion, self knowledge becomes a luxury we can't afford. How do we expect to know ourselves, accept ourselves, and embody ourselves when we have no energy left to do so? And rest as restoration, and women resting and finally getting to know themselves, accepting themselves, and embodying themselves. That is the feminine restoration. And it's not supposed to be this like revolutionary thing because it's so simple, but yet it is. And one of the reasons why is the gender sleep gap. Also, with the new series, I want to introduce a new vibe, and it's the journal club vibe. And a journal club is basically like a book club, but for journal articles. And it's basically when a bunch of researchers, they come together usually like once a week, and then you talk about one article or like one topic and then a couple articles. And the goal isn't really to read as many articles as possible. The goal is to, even if you're covering just one article, to really get into the article, like really get into it, yeah, and analyze a lot of the stuff and ask questions about it. And it's really more of a focus in depth than breadth. And I think in the fried attention span era, which a lot of us are victims of, it's a breath of fresh air. So, on this topic of the sleep gender gap, I found this review article titled Sex Differences in Sleep, Circadian Rhythms, and Metabolism Implications for Precision Medicine by Locke et al. And the article is also open access. So if you want to read it, we can journal club together. In the review article, the reviewers highlighted how number one, sex differences have a marked effect on the sleep, wake, and circadian regulation in humans. Number two, how sex differences in sleep and circadian factors modulate metabolic control. And number three, the relevance of these differences for precision medicine. With precision medicine, or the closely related personalized medicine, being the goal to create tailor-made modalities for people for the best health outcomes. And a note on precision and personalized medicine, I really think this is the future, like having more personalized forms of medicine tailor made for you, but unfortunately it is very, very expensive. So right now only the very wealthy people can access it. But with a top-down, trickle-down mechanism function of fashion and consumerism, precision and personalized medicine being only for the wealthy right now, it could be available to everyone in the future, even us regular people. So let's talk about the first section, and it's the sex differences in sleep. The reviewed materials that the reviewers reviewed on their review article, it measured sleep quality in two ways. And the first way is self-reported, and the second is objectively using PSG or polysomnography, which is considered the golden standard for measuring sleeps in like labs and clinics. So in the self-reported measurements, females generally rate their sleep quality as lower than males, independent of differences in sociodemographical and or lifestyle factors. Females report more monthly fluctuations in self-recorded sleep quality, such that more sleep disturbances, including insomnia, frequent awakenings, non-restorative sleep, unpleasant dreams or nightmares, are reported during the premenstrual week and the first days of menstruation compared to other menstrual phases. And if you look at this diagram, the blue boxes are the sleep disorders, and the orange boxes, they look yellow. The orange yellow boxes, they are the circadian sleep wake disorders, and the ones with the bold lines, they have robust evidence, and then the dashed lines, there's preliminary evidence. And what's interesting about this is that women are more often diagnosed with insomnia, while men are more often diagnosed with obstructive sleep apnea. On insomnia, a large body of evidence shows that females are more often diagnosed with insomnia than males are. This could in part be due to many contributing factors to insomnia that are more prevalent in females than males. For example, insomnia is strongly associated with major depressive disorder and anxiety disorders, which are also more prevalent in females. Since females are more likely to report symptoms of insomnia, they are also twice as likely to report these to their physician, increasing the number of insomnia diagnoses. And this is a pretty common theme where the number of people diagnosed with something isn't really directly tied to the number of people who actually have it, because there could be factors affecting the rate that people get diagnosed. So if you're more likely to report it to your doctor, go to the doctor, you're more likely to be diagnosed. Moving on obstructive sleep apnea, OSA, the reviewers mentioned that men are almost 3 times more likely to be diagnosed with OSA, and that factors contributing to the higher occurrence of OSA in males involve physiological variances in upper airway composition and differences in neuromuscular reflexes to upper airway collapse. In females, upper airway resistance is affected by the menstrual phase, with lower resistance observed in the luteal phase compared to the follicular phase. OSA may therefore be overlooked in a diagnostic study conducted in the luteal phase. And this just highlights how women's 28-day cycle does affect physiology way outside of our reproductive systems, like literally changing your upper airway resistance, like breathing. Your 28-day cycle affects how you breathe. Okay? And the added layer of complexity and variability that the 28-day cycle introduces to scientific research is exactly why women have historically been excluded from research. They have not been considered quote unquote ideal candidates. And the reviewers also addressed this earlier in their article. Historically, biomedical research has been biased against female and non-human female mammals. That justifications include the assumption that findings derived from male subjects are universally applicable, or fearing that hormonal variations in females might add complexity to study designs and interpretation of results. Like, this is pretty common knowledge how much of our scientific research up until the early 1990s is overwhelmingly male. And it wasn't until the 1993 NIH Revitalization Act, which mandated that women and minorities be included in all NIH-funded clinical research. Before this, even common conditions like heart disease were understudied in women, despite being one of the leading causes of death for women. And more recently, the 2016 NIH Sex as a Biological Variable (SABV) policy, which required researchers to consider sex as a biological variable in preclinical studies, not just human trials. And this was a step towards addressing the bias that even lab rats were overwhelmingly male. We are really just coming into the golden era of scientific research for women when you think about it. We're 17 years in, so I'm really excited for everything else that we're going to discover. But in the meantime, we have to contend with the effects of the exclusion of women from research and the knowledge gap caused by our exclusion, and therefore the health outcome gaps that are caused by our exclusion. And this gets us into the consequences of male centered data. If you still follow the 8 hours of sleep every night rule, that actually comes from 1800s factory workers. There was this Industrial Revolution activist named Robert Owen who advocated for 8 hours labor, 8 hours recreation, 8 hours rest. Because the factory workers, they were working 10 to 16 hours a day, and Owen was like, that's not gonna fly. This is inhumane to make people work that long and that much. And then the sleep researchers who came about in the early 1900s, they came up with the 7 to 9 hour range, which a lot of us get given as sleep advice. Like if you sleep within 7 to 9 hours a day, you're good. And a lot of us follow that. But then we also have women self reporting that they needed more sleep than men. And actually, they are taking more sleep than men. In Burgard and Elshare's Gender and Time for Sleep Among US Adults, the authors write, do women really sleep more than men? Positive evidence come from self-reports of sleep duration from biomedical studies, social scientific studies of large population-based samples, time diary data, and actigraphy. Women's longer sleep duration is surprising, however, given gender differences in time used during waking hours. Women, especially married women with children, spend more time than men doing unpaid work, even if they are employed and have less leisure time. Moreover, evidence is accumulating that women get less high quality, uninterrupted sleep because they prioritize family needs even during sleeping hours. Although women, and especially employed mothers of small children, tend to have less free time, they actually use what little time they have left to sleep a little longer. The authors write, time use data show that paid work has a stronger negative association with sleep time than any other activity, and may be less compatible than other activities with finding time to sleep. We might therefore expect men to sleep less because on average they do more paid work than women. Although gender differences in sleep time could vary across adulthood as time spent in paid work rises and falls. In addition, time spent doing unpaid work that accompanies family formation and child rearing could interfere with time for sleep. Compared to men, women do almost twice the amount of housework and childcare. Almost twice. As individuals form families and raise children, women may face decreasing time for sleep relative to men. That just because you're not paid for your work at home doesn't mean it's not work. Just because it's not paid labor doesn't mean it is not labor. If you're labor, it's labor. You still spend time and energy and sacrificing sleep to do this kind of caretaking social reproduction work, whether you get a paycheck for it or not. Home labor is still labor.
You make me do too much labor.
And on top of doing almost twice the amount of home labor, these women, employed mothers of small children, they still have to do 100% of their outside paid labor. No wonder they need to sleep more. And see, even the science doesn't support being with a low effort partner. Annoying. Now, on the topic of women needing more sleep than men do, researchers at Loughborough University's Sleep Research Centre in Leicestershire, England, say women need more sleep than men because obviously their brains are more complex. Women's brains are wired differently, so their sleep need will be slightly greater, says Professor Jim Horn, the director of the Sleep Research Centre. Women tend to multitask, they do lots at once and are flexible, and so they use more of their actual brain than men do. Wives around the world corroborated Horn's findings. See, someone give this man a mic. Women use more of their actual brain than men do. That's a quote, okay? But I don't think it has anything to do with how we are wired or we're so special that we are smarter than them. No, it's because we have to. This is against our will. Okay, this is against women's wills. The professor goes on to say, for women, Poor sleep is strongly associated with high levels of psychological distress and greater feelings of hostility, depression, and anger. He says, in contrast, these feelings were not associated with the same degree of sleep disruption in men. Interesting. In Suarez's 2008 article titled Self-Reported Symptoms of Sleep Disturbance and Inflammation, Coagulation, Insulin Resistance, and Psychosocial Distress, Evidence for Gender Disparity, the author writes, in multivariate adjusted models, overall poor sleep quality, more frequent problems falling asleep, and longer periods to fall asleep were associated with greater psychosocial distress, higher fasting insulin, fibrinogen, and inflammatory biomarkers, but only for women. And the psychosocial distress may include elevations in hostility, anger, and depression, and the higher fasting insulin is associated with an increased risk for type 2 diabetes, also cardiovascular disease and other chronic metabolic disorders. Now, this is pretty serious stuff and has real implications for the health of real people in real life. Women's lack of sleep do affect us. So having most of our medical knowledge pre-1990s only studying men and their specific biologies is detrimental to women. Okay, so we have a knowledge gap and we have a sleep gap and we have a gap in a lot of things. So acknowledging that these gaps do exist is the first step to fixing them. So, okay, now we know. How do we move on from this? First, we must normalize rest in women, not as a reward, but as a rhythm, not as laziness, but as a birthright. To do less, to be still, to simply exist without apology. And of course, with nuance. Rest doesn't mean withdrawing from what you love or abandoning your work, your art, your people. It means building a life where your energy is sacred. The energy that you spend with others, you spend doing things for yourself and for others, it's recognized, it's respected. But also, it's creating a life where your worth is not measured by your output. It means saying no to those who expect you to do more so that they can do less. It means knowing deep in your bones that you don't have to earn rest. That time spent doing less, doing nothing, getting to know yourself, accepting yourself, and embodying yourself, that is not time wasted. You are not a machine. You are a woman, and you are allowed to rest. That's all I have for you today. I just wanted to let you know that your greatest power lies in you knowing yourself, accepting yourself, and embodying yourself. And remember, protect your energy. Also, go to ilovealishop.com and use code SPRING10 to get 10% off your order. That's ilovealishop.com and use code SPRING10 to get 10% off your order. Thank you so much. Bye.